All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Fit Take with Joey Gas podcast. Back with another special guest this week. We have Paige Myers. She is a registered dietitian and now doing online nutrition and potentially fitness coaching pretty soon here. And really excited to have her on again. She was on my podcast. This was probably what, like 2020, I
Oh
think.
gosh, yeah, I think it was like 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago, and it was like I think you were maybe my second guest that I ever had on, I think. Um,
Crazy.
yeah, and it's crazy to think like I went back and watched some of those videos of like previous podcasts before and how young we looked and how young we even sounded, at least I did. I'm like, geez, like it's a little cringy going back and watching some of that like super old stuff, but it's a good reminder of like how far we've grown since then. Um, but and were you a registered dietitian when you were on before?
No, I think that was during my dietetic
Okay.
internship. Yeah, I think it was pre becoming a dietitian. So it might have been more like 4 years ago. So we were young.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it might have been like either right when you became an RD or right before, but either way, it was a while ago. But really excited to have you on. Go ahead and I know we kind of touched on your story like the first time you were on the podcast, but kind of just give a little bit of background about you, any fun facts, what you do, and just kind of let the audience know a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So, first of all, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, Joey. Excited to be back. I've been a registered dietitian for now 3 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. My background, I first worked in the NICU. I then worked in GI since that, and I've run coaching businesses since that. So, I've been working with online clients throughout my dietetic internship and into now. Some fun facts about me. I used to be a competitive power lifter. I now am not. I hurt my back and I am just cooked. Um, Another fun fact is I'm actually a black belt in Taekwondo. Some people know that about me, some people don't. But I have very active hobbies. I have a passion for fitness and nutrition. Some of my background that got me into nutrition is I used to be a marathon runner. I was underfueled, undernourished, very skinny, frail, the classic runner. And I found my love for food and fitness and broke myself out of that cycle. And here I am now, healthy, happy, would never run again and lift weights. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I didn't realize you had hurt your back, and that was like a big part of why you stepped away a little bit from powerlifting. Like I know you were kind of getting into the more kind of bodybuilding style like programming now. Um, was it like a specific movement that you did that like tweaked it, or what happened there?
Yeah, super weird. So 2 months ago, I woke up one morning and had a really weird right-sided back pain. And, I kind of attributed it to my menstrual cycle. Didn't go away, got significantly worse, wasn't able to deadlift, and now it is horrible. I'm getting acupuncture for it, working with a chiropractor. So we don't exactly know what's going on. That was definitely my cherry on top as to I cannot power lift anymore. Don't know what happened once I turned 26. It's like my body can't handle what it used to do.
Yeah, were you like transitioning away from powerlifting or thinking about it before that happened?
Yeah. So I was supposed to compete in at nationals in September, and I ended up having to pull out of nationals. I was going to compete at 60 and I could not maintain 60. I lost my period. I was having hormonal issues, so I was like, this can't happen anymore. So that kind of started my switch to the bodybuilding side of things. And I don't want to call it bodybuilding. I would never step on stage, but switch away from the heavy lifting and more towards focusing on physique.
Yeah, I always struggle with calling it that too because like right now I've kind of stepped a little bit away from powerlifting too and I'm doing more quote unquote bodybuilding stylish, but I have no plans to like ever step on stage too. So I always struggle with how to like phrase that style of training so like people understand what I'm talking about. But um I didn't know you were a black belt in Taekwondo either. So you not only deadlift over 400 pounds, but you also are a black belt in Taekwondo. So
That was a while ago, but I still that's my go-to fun fact for anytime I'm asked that question.
yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't want to mess with you, that's for sure. Um, so you kind of talked a little bit about how you were into, a marathon runner and you were kind of used to really under fueling and, maybe even not even knowing it. And then you ended up learning how to eat more and train, the way you wanted to feel your best. Um, One thing I really wanted to bring you on the podcast and talk about, which is kind of related to that, but was your like you posted something on Instagram. I think this was like a couple weeks ago, maybe a few weeks ago, and it was about your weight gain journey that you've had over the past, I think, like 1 to maybe 2 years. And I think you had talked about like overall you have gained like 30 pounds total. Maybe not in that specific short of time. And weight gain is something that so many people struggle with when it comes to achieving their body composition goals, especially women. So kind of take us through or take me through like where that journey started, when you decided like, okay, I'm gonna actually intentionally gain weight because it wasn't on accident. It sounds like something you actually chose to do.
Absolutely. So the whole weight gain journey, I've gained about 30 pounds since college. So that's like a 5 year span, I would say, maybe a little bit less than that. So in college is when I was a marathon runner. I weighed about 110 pounds. I would weigh myself multiple times a day, hope to see under 110 pounds on that scale. And that continued till about my senior year of college. That's when I started to dabble with a little bit more regular weightlifting. The whole time I would go to the gym, I would throw around some really light dumbbells, didn't necessarily, I wouldn't call it weightlifting, you know, it was exercise. And it wasn't proper form, proper movement, anything. It was throwing around dumbbells. Towards the end of college, that's when I discovered squat, bench, deadlift. And I started to incorporate more of those movements into my patterns. Again, I was still running, so not necessarily really starting to gain weight there, but I started to learn the movements. It wasn't until my dietetic internship where I really started to realize, wow, I need more food than I'm eating. And what I'm eating now isn't sustaining what I want. I didn't want to be skinny. I wanted the classic girl body, like big glutes, big shoulder, small waist, the hourglass physique that everyone talks about. And that's when I kind of realized I wasn't eating enough to sustain that. And that kind of started the weight gain journey. So the first year of my dietetic internship, I got up to that like 120 pounds. So it was a solid 10 pounds. If you looked at pictures, I still looked very, very skinny. The next 10 pounds is the next couple of years. And that's when I got into powerlifting, actually. So when I first got into powerlifting, I competed as a 57. So you could be, I think it was 100, is that 125 pounds cap around there?
57 kg,
Yeah, I think it was 125 was the cap, something
probably
around
somewhere
there,
around there. Yeah.
somewhere around there. So I was starting to gain a little bit more. And I set the Ohio deadlift record at 57. And then from there, training kind of plateaus. You hit that big number that you always wanted to hit, and then you're kind of stuck. So my coach at the time actually encouraged me to go up to 60, which 60 is 132 for the cutoff. And that's where, once I started to grow into the 132s, is where my performance just skyrocketed. That's when I was squatting over 300 pounds. I was deadlifting over 400 pounds. I was training phenomenal at that time. And then since then, I've now gotten up to 140 in the last year. And that's been more of my bodybuilding journey, I'd say. I will say, since not powerlifting, not having to hit a certain weight or compete at a certain weight class, I've definitely let go of the scale like completely. There's no emotional attachment to that number. I would say throughout that whole journey, there wasn't a huge attachment to the scale once I got past that 120. But you're always worried because you don't want to be too heavy for your weight class. knowing like I'd have to water gut cut this and performance might sink. That was the only worry I would say in terms of the number. It wasn't necessarily like a physical, like I was worried about my physical appearance. I was more so, oh my gosh, if I'm going to compete, how am I going to cut this weight? So now that I don't have that burden, there is no attachment to the scale. If my dream physique is 160 pounds, so be it. So it's definitely been a really interesting journey. And I'm someone who's naturally skinny. So I have a very fast metabolism. I have to eat a lot. People are typically shocked with the amount that I have to eat, which is always sometimes a little bit of a mental burden too. But, I just got to do what I got to do.
Yeah, so it sounds like a big part of you starting this journey of like gaining weight was kind of driven by performance, at least recently over the past like 1 to 2 years of you like, okay, your deadlifting or your numbers were kind of stalling, so you wanted to increase your food to just increase that, capacity to get even stronger. Um, how how did you get over, I guess initially when you were at like 110 pounds and you talked about stepping on the scale multiple times to like make sure you were under that mark. What kind of things helped you to get over that burden and be like to break through that 110-pound mark? Because I find that a lot of women struggle with, okay, they don't want to be over, 140 pounds or 150 pounds. And it's like, well, your dream physique that you want actually weighs more than that, probably. So we have to break through that. But like going back and, I know it was a few years ago, but how did you get past that barrier that you had set on yourself before?
Yeah, and I think that's a really tough one. And I see so many clients in that same situation. I think a big thing for me, I've always had very supportive people in my life. Like my brother was a power lifter, my mom was into fitness, my dad was into fitness. And I had really good people that supported me and, would call me out on bad habits, first of all. But also, from my standpoint of what I could do, is looking at some of the fitness influencers, bodybuilding women that had physiques that I like, and acknowledging that they don't weigh 110 pounds. They probably weigh upwards of 140, 150 pounds, and realizing the physique that I want isn't achievable if I don't get past that number. And acknowledging too that if I take progress pictures at my physique at 110, I wasn't happy with it. I looked at it and I was like, I don't have curves. My butt is flat. I don't like this body. So why is the scale holding me back? If I don't physically like what I see in the mirror. So I think it's a combination of those things. And it definitely didn't happen overnight. And it's something I think everyone's working on, completely detaching the scale and everything from their worth essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having the right people as support is so important. People that are going to like you said, call you out on your stuff if they find that you are allowing that to limit yourself, and that could be people like your family, like you talked about, or it could be a coach that you have. Like that's one reason why people hire coaches, because if they don't have one, they're going to be stuck not going past 130 pounds or 140 when they should, right? And the coach is there to be the objective person to be like, no, you actually do need to gain this weight to gain the muscle that you want to be, have that body that you want there. Um, Something else that I'm curious on, like as you've gone through this journey, do you do you weigh yourself pretty frequently, like every day or so, and find like an average? I know that's something a lot of people do. Or do you try to weigh yourself less frequently now that you know it's going to go up? Like, how do you approach that? Just curious.
I still weigh myself every day. I'm a huge data person and I don't want to just see a scale weight once a week because what if that weight dropped or what if it went up drastically? Or, what if it's my menstrual cycle and I'm holding an extra 3 pounds and I think that that weight is actually muscle that I put on when it's really just water weight. So I really do weigh myself every morning and look at the trends. And I think it's the most helpful for me. I personally think if I only weighed myself once a week, I would go crazy, not knowing the actual trends, actually where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with this 100%. I have most of my clients, unless they have a really big issue with the scale that we can't work through, I find most clients actually Initially, it is kind of like they go through some like mental growing pains of like, oh, like the scale weight is up today, like what's going on? And they freak out. But as time goes on and they like learn how normal these like weight fluctuations are and up and down based on water retention, they tend to let the scale affect them less than as time goes on. And they actually can overcome that versus just trying to avoid it in general. Um, and I think something you kind of mentioned before that really helped you get over that hump with the scale was taking progress pictures. And I think that is so helpful in conjunction with weighing yourself because if you're able to compare like in your aspect, okay, I'm 10 pounds heavier, but I look at my pictures and actually like how my body looks so much better, then that like right there just completely blows the aspect of the scale like out of the water because you're like, well, I weigh more when I previously thought that was a bad thing, but I actually like how I look better. So like why am I even placing this value on the scale to begin with?
Absolutely. Like no one is going to look at you and say, "Oh, she looks like she's 112 pounds today versus 110." They're going to look and see, "Oh, wow, you look more muscular. You look more happy. Your face is filling out. You don't look like a skeleton." They're going to notice those things, whereas the number really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and something else too is like a lot of women that I work with that come to me and we start working together is they want to like grow muscle in certain areas like their glutes like you said, that was your goal, like your glutes, and you wanted to grow areas and grow muscles in other areas too, and it's like if you want those areas to increase in size, like that size and mass is going to have some weight to it. Like it can't just, you can't just be bigger but not have any actual weight to it. Like, so you have to see that scale go up. And sure, there are some body composition changes we can see without the scale moving, some body recomposition with losing fat and building muscle at the same time. But eventually, if you keep going, you'll get to a point where like weight gain probably will happen and it's not going to be a bad thing. It's going to actually be a good thing. It's just getting over that mental hump to do it.
Absolutely. That's where I love using the example of like some of the not like an Olympian bodybuilder, but think about the fitness influencer bodybuilder. Some of those girls, especially the wellness girls, they put on like 40, 50 pounds in the off season. And all of the clients that come to me, they love their look and they openly post about how much weight they gain in the off season versus when they're on stage. And it just goes to show you, you sometimes have to go through that growth phase. By no means does it need to be that extreme, or should it be that extreme, but you're going to have to go through a phase where maybe you put on some weight. Maybe you are a little bit uncomfortable for a second, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a fat loss phase after that or, pull back a little bit after that. I think it's really important that there are those different phases throughout your whole journey, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of people too would be surprised at how much like weight these people have gained or like you have gained to build the muscle you have. And then also be surprised at how much food they actually have to eat. Like there are clients that come to me sometimes and they're eating a super low calorie intake to begin with, and they're like, I have no idea how I'm supposed to eat this much food. Like, this is so many calories. I'm not used to eating that much. How many calories do you have to eat if you don't mind sharing? Because I know you said it's like a really high number.
I'm eating 3,100 right now, and let me tell you, it is a full-time job. And I do want to say, if anyone's listening to this, I did not just eat 3,100 calories overnight. It's been the accumulation of years of fitness. You can't just start eating that and expect to not gain body fat.
Yeah, and 3,100, that is pretty high. I mean, that's like how much close to as much as I like maintain my weight on pretty much. And I know you're kind of trying to gain probably still eating that amount. Um, but it's still high. But it's also too kind of a blessing because then if you do want to go into a fat loss phase, you probably are able to eat so much more than what you would have been able to eat, before you gain this weight or before you gain this muscle.
Absolutely. I haven't been in that fat loss phase yet because I haven't achieved the physique that I want yet. So we'll see. I'm hoping I can be one of those people that cuts on high calories, but who knows?
Yeah. Also, too, I have found that like if you're somebody who your metabolism does tend to like adapt very easily to the high end. A lot of times it adapts kind of easy to the low end too. Sometimes, not always, but hopefully that's not the case for you and you're able to still eat like a super high amount and lose.
Hopefully.
Um, so with this like weight gain that you've seen, or maybe even just with like clients that you've worked with, sometimes I hear from clients like, oh, like my clothes in certain areas are actually feeling a little bit tighter, and they automatically associate that with something negative. Like, what are some experiences you've had with clients regarding that? Things you've maybe told them to ease their mind with that, or maybe even yourself. Like, if you some of your clothes started to get tighter and you had to buy like bigger sizes or something, like how did you kind of mentally navigate that with yourself or with people you've worked with?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you first and foremost, this is the most disappointing thing about my whole weight gain. Is my Gucci belt doesn't fit anymore because it's my waist grew and I can't wear it. And at the end of the day, I just kind of had to get over it. And with clients, what I will say to them is that, your body is going to change and it's okay. You might have to buy some new clothes or you might have to get used to feeling your clothes differently on your body, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. And with clothes, find the clothes that fit you well. If you're feeling large, wear something tight. Like that helps to accentuate what you do have, the curves that you do have. Don't hide yourself in those baggy clothes. But at the end of the day, our bodies do change. And just like the way that you don't fit in your jeans from high school, you might not fit in your jeans from 3 years ago. And that's okay. Look at it as an exciting experience. You maybe go and get to buy some new clothes. You can sell your old clothes, donate them, do something good with them, and expand your wardrobe. But it's unrealistic to think that we're going to stay the same size the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and I think too, like realizing that your clothes can fit tighter, but it could also like it could be a good thing with the body that you're trying to achieve too. Like if your clothes feel tighter on your thighs, but something that you had a goal of was to like get your quads bigger or like more
Yeah.
defined or like you're probably gonna feel like your thighs feeling tighter against your jeans or against your pants or whatever it is. And same thing with like around your glutes or something. If those are growing, your pants are probably going to feel tighter, and even your like back and your shoulders, if those areas are growing muscle wise, then your shirts might even feel a little tighter in some of those areas. And I think there's just this like misconception or this idea that in order to be progressing, everything has to be getting smaller. Your clothes have to be feeling fitting looser than what they were before. And that's not always the case. Like things can feel tighter and you actually still be moving in the right direction and not backwards. It's just this messaging that I feel like has been ingrained in people for so long, especially women out there.
Absolutely. I see it as a plus the first time you rip a pair of jeans. When you try to put them on, that means your butt grew. That's exciting. Like, celebrate that. But yeah, I think you're totally right. I think it's just social media marketing. Women are always taught that being smaller is better. And if your clothes don't fit, you need to lose weight. That's just not the question. If you're going to grow, you have to grow your clothes. There has to be more room in your clothes for the body that you're growing, so it's definitely not a bad thing.
Yeah. And sizes are just so arbitrary, honestly, too. Like, especially you can buy a shirt that's like a medium from a certain brand and buy a shirt that's a medium from a different brand, and they could fit totally different. Like I've bought stuff from Alpha Elite before, and their clothes, at least the guys' clothes that I bought, run so much smaller than like other normal clothes that I bought. And like typically I would buy like large stuff and I've had to buy like extra large. And that's the only brand I've ever had to buy extra large. And like it doesn't mentally get to me, but like somebody who's so attached to that specific size of their clothing probably would, which is just kind of silly because it's just, the clothing company putting a label on it and saying, okay, this is where we're going to call this one medium. And, you know, like it's just so arbitrary and random. And so I think being attached to that is going to set you up for failure if you really do want to grow muscle in those areas.
I agree completely. No one's going to know that you got the size 8 jean over the size 6 jean. At the end of the day, if it looks better and you feel better in it, that's all that matters. Like you said, it's so arbitrary. Alpha Lee does run small. I have a small hoodie and it's very constricting.
Yeah, I was shocked the first time I bought it, and I was kind of pissed because they're expensive. Like it's not cheap,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I'm the type of person that if I order something, it feels like so much work to try to send it back and get a refund. So I basically just I don't know. I just bit the bullet, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I
screw
don't
it.
blame you. I
Um,
don't blame you.
so I'm curious, like, if you've ever had clients where you start coaching them and they say that they want to like achieve this certain look, and you're like, okay, like we definitely need to put on some more muscle and maybe even gain a little bit of weight. And they're like, no, I don't want to gain muscle because I don't want to get bulky, or they don't want to get that look. What are your thoughts on that, or how have you kind of navigated those situations with like clients if they're just like, I don't even know if I really want to like lift weights that much because I don't want to get a bulky look.
Absolutely. Thankfully, the majority of my clients do want to lift weights, so I haven't really run into that struggle yet with my client base, but I definitely have had people that don't want to put on weight, don't want to get bulky, and that's where I'll kind of phrase it as like a body recomposition phase. So, we're working on a phase where maybe you're losing some fat, you're gaining some muscle, because these tend to be of the beginners because they haven't lifted weights before. Maybe they just started and they don't necessarily understand the different phases like muscle gain, fat loss, all of that. So, we'll start there and really focus on high protein, and oftentimes they'll start to see results from just that, and then eventually you can start to increase calories a little bit, because maybe they're feeling really good in the gym, maybe they want some more energy. I try to ease them into it from that sense, but I really like the whole body recomposition phrase. It sounds a lot less scary to clients, and I always assure them that they're not going to get bulky. If you hired me, I'm not bulky. You would really have to try to get bulky. So, I always say, look around at the people in your space. I don't think someone would work with a coach that they don't want to look like either. So, you know, there are those phases. And when they do feel uncomfortable, I'm there to reassure them that, it's just a phase and you're not going to feel like this forever. But I think the majority of my clients really put their trust in me, which I am thankful for. But I can see for a lot of people where it can be tough.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because like you're somebody you deadlift over 400 pounds, or you have in the past, and probably can still do it, I'm pretty sure. And you are eating
Maybe.
over 3,000 calories a day. And like you said, you're nowhere near bulky. And I think there's this like misconception that lifting heavy or eating a lot of food is automatically going to get you this like really bulky look. And it's not that easy to get bulky, like you said. Especially it's not that easy to put on a lot of muscle. People spend years trying to like achieve the physique they want and put on muscle. And I don't think you just starting to eat a little bit more food, or you just getting into lifting, is going to magically just blow you up unless you have like insane genetics where future Mr. Olympia or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could get bulky that easily. It's taken 4 or 5 years now, and we're not there. But yeah, you're so right. It takes time. And I think people just automatically think that they're going to look like they're 3 weeks out from a bodybuilding competition if they start eating a little bit more protein and lifting weights. And that's just simply not true. And you have to train hard on top of that. And that's a learned skill. That's not something that starts the first time you step in a gym either. There's just so many factors that go into it that it's physically impossible to get bulky and without trying, I should say.
Yeah, and something else I wanted to kind of ask you too is with you, like if you were dealing with somebody who they came to you and let's say, a client wants to build muscle, but they don't want to eat in a calorie surplus because you obviously like have been in a calorie surplus to put on this weight. Like why can't we just eat at maintenance and just like gain muscle and change your physique that way? Like what would even be the purpose of you like trying to go into a surplus versus just staying at maintenance?
Absolutely. If you stay at maintenance long enough, you may be able to have some body recomposition. But really, what we need to build muscle is we need an excess of calories and we need a training stimulus. You could argue all day that at maintenance you still could build muscle, but at the end of the day, if you're an experienced lifter, that's not enough to stimulate new tissue growth. You really do need the excess of calories. And the thing is, if you stay at maintenance for long enough, your lifts are going to hit a plateau. So we need that training stimulus and we need to be increasing that training stimulus as well. So if our lifts are plateauing, our food is plateaued, nothing's going to happen. We either need to increase that training stimulus or we need to increase food in order to see results. So you could spend years at maintenance and look the same. Your progress might be really slow. And that's not to say that it's bad to be at maintenance, because there's definitely a time and a place. But if you're trying to actively grow new tissue, you need that surplus of calories.
Yeah, I find this that being a big issue of people, they have this like misconception that just like lifting weights and eating enough protein is enough to continuously build muscle like really forever, and they just need to keep doing that. And they don't realize like once you get to a certain point, you actually like need to, like you said, be eating a little bit more calories than what you burn at least, so you're in a surplus to build more muscle from there. Like eventually, if you keep going, you'll get to that point. And there are obviously some clients where if they do have a lot of weight to lose or a lot of body fat to lose, like doing a purposeful building phase is probably like, on the lower end of the list of like importance. But eventually, some clients do get to the point where they are lean and they're like, hey, like I still want to improve my muscle definition and tone, but I'm like the thought of eating more than what I burn and potentially like quote unquote getting fat is like their worst nightmare. And it's really hard to like get them over that hump and to get them bought into that. Um, w- what are have you dealt with clients where it's been really hard for them to buy into the fact that, hey, I might even put on a little bit of body fat during this phase too, in order to like gain some muscle at the same time?
Yep, I've absolutely dealt with those clients. And in those scenarios, I tend to increase calories very, very slow. Like we might even use the phrase like reverse diet, where it really isn't a reverse diet, but we're slowly adding those calories. So eventually that they hit that surplus level. But if they're just adding a teeny bit each week, they don't really feel like they're eating more. And then eventually it gets to a point where, okay, they're in a little bit of a surplus, or even doing like a baby surplus, like 100 200 calorie surplus. Obviously sometimes a little bit more is better, but at the end of the day we have to meet the client where they're at. I can't force someone to eat in a 300 calorie surplus. I can't force them to gain weight, but when they're ready they'll realize that there are changes that they have to make to align with their goals.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much of coaching. It's like, okay, here's the science, here's what the textbook says, here's what the research says. But how do we balance that with what the client is actually willing or capable to do? It's like a little bit of an art form there, trying to figure out how to like get them, nudge them closer to, following those guidelines there. Um, what is there a specific amount of weight that you typically aim for yourself or for clients when they are in a building phase, like a certain rate, like per month of like weight gain? Because obviously, like it's not just weight we're trying to gain; we're trying to get muscle, but that's like the easiest thing to measure versus getting body composition scans all the time, which those can be very finicky of how like accurate they are too.
Absolutely. I'm personally a fan of very slow weight gain to put on as minimal fat as possible. And that's what I have the majority of my clients that are doing in that phase too. Just because majority of people that come to me don't want to put on that excess body fat, especially if you're a power lifter. We don't have room for a ton of weight gain. So we do it really slowly. So that might be a half a pound a week. For some people, it's a little bit less than that. If we can gain a pound or two in a month, that's good on average. I don't really put anyone above that, to be honest, because everyone I do pretty slow so that we're gaining this weight over a period of time. And I think for a lot of people that really helps with mental aspect of things. And I'm sure someone's going to listen to that and be like, oh my gosh, that's so slow. Like that's not a true bulk. But at the end of the day, the population that I'm working with, mentally that is what works for them, and they tend to not put on excess body fat, maybe a little bit, but as little as possible. So if you think gaining a pound or two in a month, for a year that's maybe 10 pounds, maybe a little bit more ish, I feel like that's pretty reasonable in terms of how much muscle you can actually gain in a year.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your thoughts on that one are.
No, I agree 100%. Like those numbers are right within range of what I typically have. Like when we do move clients into that phase, that's typically what I would shoot for, or even for myself, like 1 to 2 pounds per month. Because if you're a beginner and a male, you might gain 2 pounds of muscle a month. Like that's kind of like the max that you're probably going to gain. Like, and that's 24 pounds of muscle in a year. And I think people underestimate how much like 10 pounds of muscle actually is. Like people have gone on bulks and I've heard stories about like, hey, they're going to building phase and or whatever, a surplus bulk, and they like get some kind of body composition scan and it's like, oh, I've gained 6 pounds of muscle this month. I'm like, you're
No.
probably not gaining 6 pounds of muscle. Like maybe 6 pounds of quote unquote lean mass, which a lot of that is just like water weight or like glycogen storage or whatever. It's not all muscle. So yeah, gaining 1 to 2 pounds per month, I think is like really the sweet spot. And anything faster than that, you're probably just gaining unnecessary fat, especially with women. I mean, like they do just have a slower rate of muscle gain than men. And it's also a bigger portion of their frame if they are smaller female too. Like you being 110 pounds, you gaining 2 pounds a month is going to look a lot different or feel a lot different on your frame, like when you were 110 pounds back then versus, me at 200 pounds. Like it's just such a bigger percentage of your, previous frame there. So yeah, I'm right in line with that. And that probably, if you calculate it out, what is probably comes out to, on average, like a 300 calorie surplus, maybe like 250 ish.
Yeah, somewhere around that, which I think that is so reasonable for most people. That's an extra snack, extra small meal. It's really not that much extra food that you need to eat.
Yeah, and the best part about doing it slowly like that is you're able to do it longer before you feel so uncomfortable to where you maybe have to do some kind of like fat loss phase or a cut. Like you could slowly gain that for, like you said, 9 months or a year, maybe straight without ever really feeling the need to like go into an actual cut or fat loss phase versus if you try to gain 5 pounds a month, like a lot of that's going to be fat that you're going to gain and you're going to want to do a cut sooner. And the more time you could spend in a surplus just opens the door for so much more muscle you can build.
Yeah, it's super interesting. When I was in more of the powerlifting coaching realm, coaches would want their athletes to gain like 10 pounds in 2 months to fill out their leverages. And it's just, that just grinds my gears. I understand like where they're coming from, but as a coach, I just don't think that's one, healthy, two, realistic, but also just three, not optimal.
Yeah. And also in the realm of powerlifting, it's like, sure, having some extra mass, even if it's fat, could help with like the squat, maybe even the bench, but it's probably not going to help with deadlift. And
Wow.
you're better off gaining that slower and gaining it actually through muscle. That way, like that extra mass actually helps you to produce more force to actually lift more weight that way.
Absolutely. And you just run yourself into the wall of being uncomfortable in your own skin when you put on that much weight quickly.
Yeah, and I think too, like, and this is a good thing that we brought this up, which is just I think a lot of people, especially women, hear the term like building phase or bulk and they feel like it's really scary too and think they're gonna go into this phase where they're gaining like 5 pounds a month. But like hearing, oh, we're gonna gain 1 pound per month and or maybe, a little bit more potentially. I'm sure hopefully to somebody listening who thinks they need to go through that phase, it feels less overwhelming and think, oh, like I'm not actually gaining that much, by going into this other phase.
Absolutely. We see all the extremes on social media. We see the dirty bulk. We see all of that. But in reality, if we do it the right way, it's nothing like that.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, because 3,100 calories is like up there. And like you said, didn't you say it was like almost a full time job in itself trying to eat that
Yeah.
much? Like, how do you manage, if at all, just the extra, I guess, like bloating that might come from that, or extra feelings of fullness, or trying to like fit in all that food? Because I find that's something that some people struggle with too when they're either going through a building phase or maybe they're just trying to hit maintenance and they're not used to it and they feel like, oh, this is a lot of food. I feel bulky after each meal. Like I feel extra bloated and I feel like I shouldn't be eating that much. So, like, what are some strategies, I guess, both physically and mentally, like that you do to help get you through that mental burden of feeling more full and bloated than, when you were in a
Absolutely.
fat loss phase? And then also, like, things you do to help your actual digestive system, like, handle that much food.
Absolutely. I think mentally you have to accept that if you have more food in the digestive tract, there's less the food's got to go somewhere. We have a lot of food in here. It's got to go somewhere. You might deal with a little bit extra water weight, some extra bloating, just because you have more food volume, essentially. It's not like you're gaining fat in your stomach. It's just because there's food there. So I think once you can mentally accept that, it gets a little bit easier. But also just really spacing out your meals well. So for me, I'm on a really early morning schedule. My first meal I eat at about 5:30 in the morning, then I go to the gym. So starting my day early has been really helpful for me to get in more food overall and space it well. So I find, if I'm eating about every 3 hours, then I don't ever get to the point that I feel sick from eating or I'm super uncomfortable. And throughout the day, I'll go for quick walks. Like if I have a really big meal, I'll try to go outside and walk 5 to 10 minutes to just help with digestion. Between meals, I'll drink peppermint tea to help with my digestion as well. And that is huge for me. Also, just eating slowly, trying to eat without distractions, focusing on proper meal hygiene, and choosing foods that agree with my digestive tract. Like, if I were to go and eat a burger and fries, I would feel awful for 3 days. So, I'm not going to eat that kind of food. So, I hate the term clean, but I eat very clean for a bulk. You know, all my food is whole foods, with the exception of a protein powder. But for me, eating that type of food just makes me feel a lot better overall. So that's kind of my strategy. But at the end of the night, my stomach does not look the same as it does in the morning, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's funny, like, when you've been eating quote unquote clean, like, eating whole quality, minimally processed foods for so long, and then you go and have like some kind of greasy burger and fries from a restaurant. It really does like feel like crap. Like I hate eating stuff like that unless I have like nothing else planned the rest of the day that's active. Like if I'm
Yeah.
supposed to go to the gym still, I don't even like eating Chipotle before I go to the gym. And Chipotle
Oh,
is
I
one
could
of the
never.
yeah, it's one of the like quote unquote cleaner options out of like, restaurants or fast food or whatever. But I don't even like eating that. Like if I'm gonna go to the gym, even like 4 or 5 hours later, feel like that stuff's just kind of like lingers. And you just feel like it burping up and all this stuff. So yeah, having foods that digest well with you is super important. And I think I really love what you said about your body it's not going to look or feel the same later in the day with all the food in your system still digesting versus waking up first thing in the morning and feeling like you're thinnest, right? What is that term? Like morning skinny.
Morning
That's
skinny.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's thrown out there where your body is like maybe not fully dehydrated, but like in a slightly dehydrated state from not drinking all night and then from not eating for 8+ hours, if you're getting that much amount of sleep and yeah, like you can't expect your body to look and feel the exact same way after having food in your system. Because, like I said, or like you said, it needs somewhere to go, and it's not just immediately passing through every time you eat something, which would be a problem
Absolutely.
if that were to happen.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want that. I think for me personally, when I started working out in the morning, so I only have one meal in my system, I feel so much better because I previously was working out at 5 p.m. and by then I was on meal four, going on meal five after. And I just felt so gross in the gym. I felt bloated. I honestly felt like I was getting digestive symptoms from just putting on my belt. And mentally you don't look the same either, so I would see the bloat from the side and I just didn't like seeing that. Whereas now training in the morning, I don't deal with any of that. So overall, my confidence with my bulking body, we'll call it, is much better.
Yeah, I train mostly in the morning too, and I just feel so much better in my actual session because, like I said, I can't eat something that's like so heavy, even if it's a couple hours before I go to the gym, because I just feel like I can't brace properly when I'm squatting or doing deadlifts or whatever exercises because like things just are just so compressed or whatever down there, and um, so I totally get that. So we're kind of coming up on an hour, but like, would you like what would you tell somebody if they were in a spot where like their coach or somebody was telling them, "Hey, we probably should do some kind of like building phase and, be in a slight surplus to purposely put on muscle, but they're kind of timid about it, they're afraid, especially somebody who's maybe like lost weight when they were
Mhm.
previously overweight and they're afraid to gain that weight back again." Like, what are some pieces of advice you'd give them?
I think the first one would be to take pictures. Um, that's one thing I wish I did more of throughout my journey, just taking more pictures. Even when you don't want to take the picture. um, know that this is a time where you can be a little bit more lenient. That's not to say that you have to be or that you should fall off your plan, but you have the time to maybe go out to eat with your family or your friends, which you maybe couldn't have done before. Maybe you have room to have dessert with your new macros. Enjoy those times. Look at it as this is a time for me to enjoy life a little bit more as well, within reason, but not feel so restricted. And also just have fun with it. This is the best time for training. It's a really fun time to push your strength. And whenever you see your strength go up in the gym, that's what's going to keep you going during these phases, I think. Once you start hitting all the PRs and then after that you start to see some of the physical changes, it's really fun. It's exciting. So my biggest thing would be just have fun with the whole process. Don't look at it as, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to get fat. This is the worst thing ever." Have fun with it. You might really like the body that you end up in.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's something that I always try to preach to people is like set some kind of performance goal. It doesn't have to be like a 1 rep max. It could just be like I want to hit a new 8 rep max or a 10 rep max, but set some kind of performance goals in the gym and really put your focus on that because like that's going to improve the most. And when you get that feedback of, oh, like I was actually able to hit, 200 pounds or 300 pounds on leg press for the first time for this many reps, like feels good. It feels empowering. It feels motivating to keep that process going. And you get like the best pumps in the gym too when you are
Yeah.
eating that much food and in that phase. And I think kind of the last thing you mentioned too that I wanted to just bring up again was like like you said, be a little bit more lenient in this phase. Like, you still want to stay on plan and you still want to make sure you're eating the right amount, but like you said, you have the extra calories to enjoy, going out a little bit more, out to dinner, you have extra calories to maybe enjoy, some foods that maybe you can't enjoy as much in a fat loss phase. Um, Even as far as like tracking your food, you can take some days or some meals to maybe not track, and step away from that a little bit. So when you go into a fat loss phase next and you're tracking more diligently, you're less likely to get burnt out. Like in this phase, maybe not necessarily a surplus, but maybe maintenance or surplus should be where you spend most of your time. And they should be kind of like the phases that reflect more of what your actual life should look like. I think
Absolutely.
so many people think like all they know is dieting, and all they know is being in fat loss phases, and they think that's how their life is supposed to look like, is just trying to lose fat all the time. But most of the time of your life should actually be spent in maintenance and a surplus once you get to a healthy, relatively healthy body composition.
Absolutely. And that just brought up such a good point too. You know, whenever you get to that phase that you're eating enough and you can maintain your body weight, maybe that is being in a little bit of a surplus or it's at maintenance, you can actually enjoy life a lot more. You can go on vacation and not feel like you're going to go off the rails, whether that be gain weight or lose weight, because you know how much you have to eat. Like you just start to eyeball things. You are just a lot more comfortable with what your go to meals are. But that truly should be the majority of life. It shouldn't be a stressful period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some people feel like it's boring because they don't see those like necessarily immediate changes of, oh, I'm getting leaner, and see like new muscle, like new lines of definition in their arms or whatever. But that's how it should be. Like once you get to a healthy body composition and you lose the fat initially, like you should your life should look like what it looks like at maintenance with the more flexibility. And that's where like you want to be. You want to be in the quote unquote more boring phase. Um, for most of the time. And that's how like real progress is made long term.
So true.
Um, cool. Well, I'll wrap this up then, just because I don't want to keep you too much longer. It's crazy that it's been almost an hour already.
That flu.
Yeah. But I really loved having you on, Paige, and definitely will love to have you on in the future. So for anybody listening, where can they kind of find you on social media, on Instagram, wherever?
Absolutely. Yeah. On social media at Paige Myers underscore RD.
Awesome. And then anything you want to share with the audience that you have like going on or anything, I don't know, any like projects you're working on that they might be interested in or anything like that?
Absolutely. So I'm in the process of really launching my nutrition and fitness coaching. So that is in the works. I do accept clients. The training option is a new thing. So I'm really excited to take clients down that route.
Awesome. Cool. Well, definitely go if you're listening, go give Paige a follow, show her some love. And yeah, like I said, I'll definitely have you on in the future. And thanks so much for jumping on here, Paige.
Thanks so much. It was great being here.